Welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hesser, back with another AFL round review. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. The AFL is here. May not have been exactly what we wanted when it comes to opening round, considering Mother Nature had a little bit to say when it comes to it. We'll address that here in just a little bit. Joining me to review opening round, the first two games, and kind of do a little bit of a season preview since we don't have as much footy to talk about, is player and extraordinaire, a friend of mine who I really have loved, part of the origination of the University of Cincinnati Aussie Rules football team, Mr. Kyle Davis. Kyle, great again to see you, sir.
Likewise, too, as well. Thank you so much
And
for having me on
also,
the podcast.
all right, and also one of the few Gold Coast fans that I know of, and a legendary one at that. So I had to throw that in. So let's
Appreciate
hop
that.
let's hop right into it, sir. Unfortunately, your club and along with the Brisbane Lions Geelong game were kept from going as Cyclone or Hurricane Alpha, as we say up here, unfortunately, kept that from happening. So, as a Gold Coast fan, were you a little disappointed because your team was up and ready, getting ready to play, and unfortunately, Mother Nature decided, nah, not this week?
It's disappointing, but at the same time, it's totally understandable from the AFL's perspective. I mean, those players, there's no way that they could have mentally prepared for the game when grandma's floating in a bed down the street. You're not gonna be able to be in the right mental state to have your, first game of the year.
Yeah, there
And
were.
honestly, over half the teams don't even play round zero anyways. So it's kind of it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I saw a vision of the actually what was People's First Stadium, and it literally looks like it was in between in a lake. It was that it was there much water that much water that the parking lot was basically underwater. So I totally get it. So there are only two games to cover. So as I said, we'll kind of do a season preview since we're actually going to get the full allotment of 9 games coming up this week. We'll jump into it. I will bite my tongue. I will take it, and I understand it as the opening game of the round on Friday night sees the Hawthorn Hawks come up to the SCG and knock off the Swans 96-76. Dean Cox makes his debut as the coaching and unfortunately falls a little bit short. Kyle, an incredible game, much closer than I think the 20-point score. It's just unfortunately the fourth quarter got away from the Swans, and they just could not reel this pesky, very talented Hawks team back.
Absolutely. Well, no matter what sport you look at, one week, one game is not enough to decide how a season's going to go. And to me, the earlier on the season, the less it has meaning because teams grow, change, trade, all that as the season progresses. With that being said, though, yeah, absolutely. Hawthorne greatly exceeded expectations there. They've kind of been a little bit of a rebuilding year, past few. And I don't think they were expecting that sort of result, especially on the road. But obviously, game, that's why you play the game, and Hawthorne should be pretty proud of what they did. They
Yeah,
they made it pretty telling of what they're looking toward for their season, I will say.
definitely, definitely. But the other thing too is you got to look at is they made some good off-season moves and both made big impacts. As Josh Battle from the St. Kilda Saints and West Coast Eagles Tom Barras both come into this Hawks lineup and they solidify a good defense, but not a great defense. And they looked fantastic in this game. Barras with intercept marks, Battle doing really well, including taking Tommy Papley out there for a little bit. Just incredibly fun game. I know there's gonna be talks of was Dean Cox correct for moving Tommy McCartan from a very strong fullback to a full forward? I know the Swans have dealt with numerous injuries in some of their talls with both Logan McDonald and Hayden McLean both being out with injury, unfortunately. So we'll have to see. Again, I'm not going to hog tie Dean Cox, and I'm not unlike some fan bases that I've seen. I'm not going to wire this team and say that the season's already over because they lost one game. Stuff happens. I think the Swans were competitive in this game. They didn't execute. A few errors absolutely cost them. Molly Florent trying to switched the pass and it was intercept marked and kicked a goal, and that really kind of took a lot of the steam not only out of the Swans but out of the SCG, and they really just never could recover from that. So I don't think the Swans were bad. I think there'll be a few things that'll be discussed in review. There'll be a few discussions on that. Hawks, this is a talented Hawks team. They are definitely a team I think could be in the eight, including even fighting for top four if they play this type of footy, that strong, tough, hard, but they're really, really good with footy in hand. It'll be fun to watch them. We'll jump over to the other game in Sydney at NG Stadium, and the Giants take the Collingwood Magpies to the woodshed and a 52-point win, 104-52. And I gotta say, the theme coming out of this is we'll talk about one of the other themes a little bit later in the burning questions. But man, the Giants just made the Pies look slow, lethargic, and unwilling to hunt when it came to getting the footy and then moving the footy.
I would say absolutely on that. It's obviously Australia's going through a lot right now, the hurricane and all that. And for the vast majority of people living in Australia, I'm glad that they got their little joy, their little saving grace, because I know Collingwood's sort of the Alabama football team for the AFL. That's if you're a fan of them, you love them. If you're not, you have your explicit statements about. But anyways, yeah, regarding the game, very one-sided, especially later on in the game. The Giants really gave it to Collingwood. It's been surprising because a couple years ago, obviously Collingwood lifted the flag, and last year was definitely a step backwards, just barely missing out on the premiership. But if this one game, once again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if this game is any indication of what's to come, Collingwood, I think things are going to get a lot worse for them before it gets better.
Yep, yep. It's definitely they are definitely the talk of many a footy pundit, which is actually kind of is a great lead into to the first couple of questions in my burning questions again. That's all the two games that we unfortunately were given in round zero again. Her Cyclone Alfred stole a couple of them from us, but we'll move on. Burning questions. First one, I gotta ask, as an American sports fan, you just don't see this very much. Maybe it's just the way when you do see it, it's very interesting. Did you see the coaches spat between Kingsley and Fly McRae? Because I think this is a little bit of a blow up of something that honestly wasn't that big a deal, but it was rather funny to see so many of the footy pundits literally making this such a big deal.
Well, as a Cincinnati Reds fan over the years, the Reds have probably gotten into the most fights for no good reason. You can look up Puig versus the entire Pittsburgh Pirates roster. There's an image of that. We've had David Bell going at other teams' coaches. So at the end of the day, I'm used to it. I also played hockey for 12 years, and I know the explicit words that have been said from my coach to others and back and forth. But in terms of this spat, I think it's just kind of being blown out of proportion. I mean, coaches get heated, and once in a while, if an air coach is getting heated, they want to be the more heated coach. I think it's pretty much that simple. I'm sure both of their mothers were very well respected in that heated exchange, but that's just part of when you play a competitive sport at a high level, and tempers can flare.
According to somebody, basically, I think it was Fly McRae giving Toby Bedford a little bit of stick because he gave up a 50-meter penalty, which led to a goal. And Kingsley basically told him he's better than that and to sit down. And unfortunately, McRae did listen to Kingsley, who, again, has the biceps of Thor. So I think I'd probably do the same thing. I mean, Kingsley just flexes his arms at me, and I think I'm going to take a seat. So I totally get it. I understand what people say is you don't want coaches in youth ages talking smack to opposing players. You really don't like it in the first place. It comes off very tacky. I know some of the pundits have pointed to what Kingsley did last year in the finals, kind of making fun of Jack Ginnivan doing the little airplane thing and telling him he doesn't get to fly to Sydney. Again, for me, it looks tacky. I think coaches need to show some decorum. You're the leader of this entire group, and for you to let your emotions get that much that you're going to trash talk a player, I mean, come on, pull your head in a little bit. But again, I understand it. Sometimes the heat of the moment, something happens, you regret it. McRae kind of made it off like it was a joke between him and Kingsley. I think that's McRae kind of trying to be cheeky, thinking he can get away with it. And reports have come out. So again, was it a big deal specifically the incident? No. I think you do kind of say, hey, pull your head in, fly. Don't do that. So totally get it, but it was a
Yeah.
very interesting situation. So we'll
I
we'll
will,
stay. Go ahead.
yeah, I will also say, I kind of give this perspective on any sort of sport where this happens. It's men playing a children's game. It's a form of entertainment. And
Mhm.
for better or worse, these sort of things, you don't want them to happen too often. When they do happen, it's entertainment.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it is what it is.
Yep.
Talk about it and move on. You know what I mean? It is what it is.
Yeah, totally get it. So, and then we'll transition to this because I know this has been a major talking point with a lot of the Monday morning quarterback shows over in Australia already is Collingwood used this off season to kind of they're basically going for it this year and next year, bringing in Dan Houston. They bring in oh God, Membry from St. Kilda to boost their forward line. They bring in another one of the GWS Giants to be in their midfield. So they're going for it this year. And if round one, as you kind of said earlier, if round one was any indication, they may have jumped the shark a little bit on whether they were flag contenders. Do you think Collingwood's regretting? I know it's only one game. I know. So some people are saying this is jumping the shark, asking the question, coach. I understand. But is there a little bit of Collingwood fans that are probably regretting is did they jump? Did they do too much to try to win this year? And has it cost them a lot more going ahead?
Well, to be afforded one bad pun, Houston, we have a problem. Um, you know, I think Collingwood has made decisions they've made, and they got to live with them. When you take steps to stay competitive in the league, you're going to make some missteps, and that happens. Obviously, Collingwood a couple years ago, they won the flag. As a Gold Coast Suns fan, I would never criticize my club. I would criticize them for the next decade if they won one championship, right? But this is Collingwood, and we have to put a different standard onto them that we would put on some of the smaller clubs. And ultimately, while Collingwood has won the Premiership, this happened a couple years ago. We have to look at where we are now in the present day. And I'm not really a fan of some of the trades that they've made. I think retaining a lot of key talent from that Premiership team was was probably a better solution. I have to look a little more into the salary cap issues and all that, as well as whose contracts were up for renewal, all that. But at the end of the day, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I feel like Collingwood has probably tinkered with what was working a little bit too much.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. Dan Houston stepping in next week could be a little bit of a switch. So again, we could be jumping at shadows. Collingwood could come up next week and absolutely slay next week. We'll have to see. But I mean, Port Adelaide's coming in. They're fresh. It'll be interesting to see are either of their star midfielders both going to play will be the big question. And can Port Adelaide do the same to Collingwood what GWS did? Because if they can, it's going to make for a long, long season if Collingwood cannot right the ship. And Fly McRae can deflect all he wants, but if this thing goes haywire, he's going to be the one holding the reins, and we'll have to see how things go. It'll be interesting. And then the last one, and I know this is definitely interesting for someone like you who again is you and me over here in the States, is that opening round has drawn a lot of ire amongst many Victorian fans. And again, I love you Victorian fans that do listen to me, but do know that there are times that you whinge about things that I personally just don't understand. So for me, and I kind of go off this, is that do you like opening round where that we have the kind of the focus on the four northern clubs facing some of the bigger Victorian clubs? um, would you change it at all to make it a little bit better, or would you just scrap it? Let's just go to round one and just dissolve opening round to the annals of bad ideas that just never should be repeated again.
I like the idea of it in principle. So I believe that a lot of this opening round idea came out of the NRL. because
Mhm.
they kind of do a very similar thing. The difference is though the NRL picks opening round to be in a different part of the world to help grow the game. The past couple years, it's been in Las Vegas. Major League Baseball has also done kind of a similar thing where every year, a few weeks before the regular season starts, around the middle of March, they go off to like South Korea or Japan. They play a few games there. I like the idea of an opening round, but the part that they're missing is it needs to be in a different part of the world. I know America isn't doing great in terms of its cricket grounds, but one year you could put a few games, either, in that stadium that was built, Grand Prairie in Texas. You could put some, one year you could go to India. One year you could go to South Africa. One year, maybe New Zealand, and use that as a chance to grow the sport as opposed to just giving an extra week that we like highlight non-Melbourne teams. It doesn't. I like the idea in principle, but I really think they can do more to expand the game for this week. Because if it's just going to be Australia, I would just scrap it.
Well, I think it's a little bit of NR they New South Wales and Queensland are NRL country. They're dominated by NRL. So I get the premise. And I've said this idea a couple of times. For me, if you're going to change it to that the four primetime games, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday twilight, all are a northern state game, and then play all of the rest of the team, play all of the rest of the games, make it round one, or if you're going to call it opening round, call it opening round, but play all nine games. Or do like they did a few years ago, play four games in opening round, play five games in round one. So everybody plays in the first 2 weeks and everybody gets a bye. So it's not this odd, well, eight teams get two byes and everybody else doesn't. So for me, it's one of those stop calling it opening round, just go to round one, but just highlight the New South Wales and the Queensland teams as having primetime games. So do like you were going to do this year. Have Geelong, Brisbane as your Thursday night footy. Have Sydney Hawthorn as your Friday night footy. And then Saturday afternoon play West Coast versus North Melbourne. Have Fremantle versus I don't know, Essendon, and then have a game or have all of eight of the Victorian teams play all of the interstate teams and only have one game in Victoria and have that be like a Saturday afternoon game at the MCG between I don't know, the Western Bulldogs and St. Kilda. I don't know. Just get all nine games in, but focus your biggest audiences, your prime times, your Thursday night, your Friday night, your Saturday night, and your Sunday prime time, your Sunday like basically twilight, those be the New South Wales and Queensland teams. So you still highlight them, but you're still getting an entire round. Whether they'll do it or not, I don't think so. I think that again, the AFL are very stubborn and they're going to do it their way, no matter how much protest they get from other things. It's another one I've been lambasted on this channel several times because I've said the AFL will eventually have the grand final in twilight or a night grand final. It's going to happen. It's when they finally go, you know what, we really don't care. The fans are still going to go no matter what. I've challenged a few people like, we don't want it to move. I said, okay, well, if your team makes the grand final and that's the year that they move it, are you not going to watch it? And you can always see them hesitate because they know they're God. Because I said, if you're not going to stand by your opinion at 2:30, it can't change, then even if your team plays in the grand final, you better not watch it. Because if you do, you're contradicting yourself. Don't argue for something if you're going to turn around and still support it. Gotcha on that one. So I don't know.
Well, I will say I hope that they never change the grand final or
They're
move it
going
up a
to.
little bit.
They're
Because
going to.
otherwise, because I ain't waking up at 6 in the morning, even if Gold Coast is in the final. Maybe
And I
I'll
get
go
it,
right
and I
back
get
to
it, and it,
bed.
and that's the other thing that I tell a lot of people. I said technically, I really, as a fan, I don't want it to move because personally, right now, it's the grand final still at a decent time for me. If
Okay.
and even for you, but if they move it to a twilight, they move it to a night game. Man, I'm waking up at 2:30 or 4:30 in the morning to watch the grand final. That's just the honest to God truth. That is just the truth for us American fans. So I get why American fans don't want it to move. I just live in the reality of that in the long run in Australia, the AFL, there's one thing that rules the AFL, and that's the mighty dollar. And they know if they play a game at prime time, they're going to get so many more viewers because Queensland and New South Wales have a good a big chunk of population that do not watch daytime finals. They watch nighttime grand finals. That's when they'll watch. They're going to get a huge boost in grand final of figures if they play it later. They know that. They want to move to it, but they're fighting with a lot of the Victorian traditionalists who wanted it to, well, I wouldn't say traditionalists because that's not even accurate either. That they're so used to it being at 2:30, they don't want it to change. But a lot of the people that I know of that don't live in Victoria, many of them either don't care or wouldn't mind it changing because it would actually make it a little bit easier to watch. Personally, that's not everybody. I'm not flat brushing either side. There are Victorians that probably don't care, and there's Victorians that care very much. But well, sorry, we went on a tangent on that one. So, but I just, like I said, I don't think they'll scrap it. I think they'll keep it. I don't think they'll change it to my idea. It'd be awesome if they did, but I don't think they will. So as we kind of said, two games were canceled, were postponed. So I thought since we've only had two games in the season, let's do kind of a quick season preview for this season. We're going to just do real quick highlighters here between Kyle and I, and just to kind of see how we see the season. So let's have some fun. We'll start with who do you think at the end of the season is going to be the Wooden Spooners, the team that finishes last, Kyle?
I'll go with the low-hanging fruit, North Melbourne. I mean,
Okay.
I breaking news: North Melbourne is not a very good football club from
Honestly, sir,
top to bottom.
I think it's gonna be Richmond because Richmond they cut deep. They traded so many of their youngsters last year. They were the Wooden Spooners last year. They only won three games, and they had Liam Baker, Shai Bolton, and several others that are now no longer Danny Orioli have all moved on, and they basically filled those spots with 18-year-old kids. I really feel, unfortunately, this is going to be a long season for Richmond. In fact, if the preseason is any indication, Richmond's going to struggle to win one game, let alone more than enough to get past anybody else. So I think for me, the Spooner is Richmond. And I think it's by a country mile, unfortunately. So now
Yeah.
we'll get the negatives out of the way. Biggest faller, what's a team that last year did pretty well that you could see tumbling down the table this year?
One of them would definitely be Collingwood, which, they didn't make the premiership last year, but I still think there's quite a bit to fall there. Other
Oh,
than that, I think Geelong could have a bit of a downward year. I still think they probably make prelims, just maybe not a home game. The not the home game, but they may be in the 5 through 8 as opposed to the 1 through 4.
mhm.
Other than that, though, I mean, a few shakeups, nothing too crazy.
See,
But I,
and,
I would
and
probably say Geelong.
Now here, and I said this, any of my any of the people that watched my draft preview, I'm very hot, I'm very, very, very bullish on this one. I don't like it because I do know several friends that are. I think the Western Bulldogs this year could be a bottom four side just because their injury total right now has some huge, huge holes through these first few rounds. And there's some games in here that are tough already with their superstars and not having them, along with a North Melbourne squad that I think is going to nick some teams. I think the Western Bulldogs are really they're on upset alert in this first round. No Bontempelli, no Trelaw, no English, no Jones. That's four huge. Oh, and Johannesson too. That's five huge outs for this team. I think the Western Bulldogs could be a bottom four side if they cannot find a way to win some games without these superstars in the lineup. So I know that's a little bit that's I'm jumping a little bit on that one, but I'm really bullish on that one. I'm hoping I'm not hoping I'm right, but I have a feeling it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. So we'll go the other way. This is the good one. Biggest climber. What's a team last year that maybe didn't make finals that could be pushing for finals this year?
I want to be optimistic and say the Gold Coast Suns could be the year they make Prem.
Okie dokie.
Um, yeah, sorry, the finals. In terms of other than my team though, I don't know. Fremantle comes to mind as a team that could really be quite a climber. So I'd say it's Gold Coast or Fremantle. I'll say Gold Coast because obviously that's my team. Fremantle, though, I really do think they've been building a good core there, and I think they could squeak in as a seventh or eighth seed this year.
Okay, ready for that? Ready for this? This is gonna be an interesting one. I'm interested to see how many people agreed with me because I actually put this tweet out on my social media and I had a few people agree with me. I think it's the Adelaide Crows. I think the Crows had their bump year last year. Last year they had that year where they kind of went, oh. They they had been progressing up the ladder each and every year. And sometimes, like Joey Montana said that years, sometimes you have that bump year. You have that year where things just don't go the same and it dips down. I think the Crows make finals this year. It would not surprise me if the Crows make finals. They're a dangerous team. If they can figure out how to maintain the Adelaide Oval as a fortress for them and steal a few games on the road, I think they can make the eight. And they've got some talent. Riley Thilthorpe this year, healthy, looks like an absolute beast. He could be very difficult to stop if he gets going. So I think the Crowies, for me, are my biggest climber. So we'll go to the next one. This is a fun one because a lot of people, they'll pick their favorite player from their favorite team. Brownlow medalist. Who, for you, sir, will be having the Brownlow hung over their neck at the end of the year?
I think Kalen Ward or Toby Green. I think GWS is gonna really surprise a lot of people this year. And obviously, as we know with the Brown and Low, it's hard to pick players from great teams because there's a lot of players. They end up picking off individual weeks from each other, and it limits their odds of winning. So I would say probably Kalen Ward. I'm gonna go with him.
Okay, I have two, and it's really hard for me to separate them only because it's I'm having a hard time because one, I'm a little bit maybe influenced by his result in round zero because I think if that's any indication on his season, it could be scary. And that's Will Day of the Hawthorne Hawks. I think he had an incredible game against the Swans. I think that's a three voter there. If he plays like that the rest of the season, I find it very, very difficult for him not to put up some good votes against some good teams. And then I'm going to go to Fremantle. And I think Caleb Sarong could be somebody. I think he started to really catch his groove last year. I know everybody usually is on the Andy Brayshaw, but I think Sarong makes more of an impact on his team. So I think Caleb Sarong, if Fremantle has this season, I think they can. I think they could be a top four side. I think Caleb Sarong could have a good shot of being another Brownlow medalist for the Fremantle Dockers. So I'm going to do this in my tweet out that I did. I had premiers and runners up, but I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to say who is your grand final matchup? Who is the two teams playing off in the championship, and then who comes out victorious in the last game of the season? So I'll ask you this: grand final matchup and who's your premier?
Well, last year was Swans Lions, and all of Melbourne was sad. I'm gonna say it's gonna be a Sydney versus Brisbane final, but it's gonna be GWS versus Brisbane. I don't see Brisbane falling off a lot. I think I really like seeing what GWS has, especially early on. They were top four, this past year. They were able to beat the Swans in the playoffs last year. I really do think that it's going to probably be those two teams, with the exception of, maybe Sydney gets in there or one of these Melbourne teams has a surprising year. But right now, I'm going to say it's GWS versus Brisbane.
All right, you and I are similar. You and I are similar when it comes to it. I had the same thing. I have Brisbane GWS in the grand final, but I have Brisbane going back to back. I just think their midfield is so good. I think they find a way to replace Joe Danaher, which I think will be the main question this entire year is who takes the Danaher role? Does Eric Hipwood step up? Do you see a Kyle Lohman? Do you see one of the youngsters? Who steps into that Joe Danaher role? Because if you look at it, they only got stronger. They add the younger Ashcroft. They should get Kitty Coleman back. They get Gardner back. They get some of those guys that tore ACLs last year. This Brisbane team did not get any worse. They got better. It is scary to think if this Brisbane Lions team stays healthy that you could see the number one overall kid, and everybody said the number one overall kid who was taken by Brisbane via the academy with Levi Ashcroft may not even get a game for a few rounds because this midfield is so stacked. Where's he going to come in unless they shift him forward or off the halfback flanker? And even there, you've still got the timeless wonder that is Zorko. You have Kitty Coleman coming back. So I just see very few deficiencies in this Brisbane Lions team. So I think the Lions will be hoisting a second cup and being a back-to-back champion for the first time since Richmond a few years ago. So that is it for the season previews. I forgot to put this in our script, Kyle, so I must apologize. Would you mind doing a real quick tipping of round one?
When you say tipping of round one,
Guessing who's going to win?
oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Picking, as we say over here in the States. Does that make sense?
Yep, we
Sorry,
call it.
I'm so used to the Australian vernacular. I always do that. So my apologies. So all right,
Oh,
let's jump to round one. I've got the fixture ready. Here we go. Round one, game one, Thursday night. Footy sees the usual matchup of Richmond v Carlton at the MCG. Who do you like in this one?
I think it's Carlton by a lot. I,
Yep.
as we say at UC, whenever we talk about our American football team, we always go Cats by 90. That's pretty much what I see on this one.
Should be an interesting one. No, Carlton big. I said Richmond's going to take their lumps this year, unfortunately. Hoping, crossing my fingers, they at least get one. Just don't let it be the Swans that they lose to, like last year that they lose to. Yeah, like last year. We'll move past that. So yeah, Carlton big on that one. Friday night footy, an absolute cracker as Hawthorn coming off that big win against Sydney take on the Essendon Bombers at the MCG. I'm going to tip the Hawks in this one. Darcy Parish out. Essendon still, I'm just not sure about Essendon this year. I'm fascinated to see the youngster Isaac Kako hop on with his connection with Nate Caddy. Should be fun, but I think the Hawks just a little bit too good. It'd be interesting to see how the Hawks' tallish defense handle a little bit of a speedier forward line. It'd be fascinating to see. So who do you like in this one?
Hawthorne as well. I think Essendon's about a middle of the road team. I think they're probably going to do fairly well. Essendon will when they're playing teams outside of Melbourne, but I just inside of Melbourne, I think Hawthorne's going to probably do a pretty good number on Essendon. I'd say it's probably going to be at least a 20 or 30 point difference in this game.
All
It's
right.
just two different classes of team right now.
A very interesting one for me. The Saturday afternoon footy should be a cracker. Will be warm as the Geelong Cats host the Fremantle Dockers down at GMHBA Stadium. Who do you like in this one?
Well, first off, as a Cincinnatian, Cincinnati Dockers versus Columbus Cats has the same feeling. So, as a Cincinnati Dockers player, I'm going to pick Fremantle. I also think, I don't know, I feel like this is the upset alert on this one. I think Geelong is probably a little bit favored in this, but I just feel like they're probably going to get to a little bit of a slow start, and I think Fremantle's gonna probably win a pretty close game here, but get the win.
Yeah, this midfield battle could be interesting because you have an inexperienced midfield and a Bailey Smith coming into Geelong versus Brayshaw Sarong and the experience and super talent of the Fremantle Dockers. I'm with you. I think the Dockers go into the Cattery and get a huge win. So let's jump up to the SCG as the Swans host the Brisbane Lions coming down from Queensland. It'll be very interesting to see Brisbane traveling down a little bit early to get out of Brisbane. It'll be fascinating to see, can the Swans make the adjustments and attack this Brisbane Lions team, or can a fresh Brisbane Lions team maybe a little rusty because they haven't played since the previous season? Be interesting to see how it goes. I like Brisbane in this one. I think Brisbane too talented, but I think Sydney stays in this a lot closer. One could come down to late in the fourth quarter. So your thoughts on this one?
So I actually a little bit more optimistic than you for the Swans. I think it will stay pretty close, but I think Sydney will get the narrow victory. I've seen too many times throughout sports where there's a rematch the next year of what the championship was, and the team that won the championship ends up losing. I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know if they feel a lot of times like, well, we beat them last year, so they underestimate their opponent. It can vary a lot, but I think I really do think that Sydney's going to pull off the narrow victory, especially considering it's in Sydney. And obviously they were going to play this past weekend. Their emotions probably riding high there. Brisbane obviously was too. So there's going to be, I think, some jitters on both sides. I just think Sydney's going to get the narrow win at home.
I hope you're right. I really do. I'm pulling my usual tipping against them and hoping I'm wrong. So I either get the tip right or my team wins. So it's a very interesting one. We'll jump down to Marvel Stadium as the Western Bulldogs host the North Melbourne Roos. This is a prime example for a chance for a huge upset, and I'm going to call it. I think North Melbourne win this one. I think North Melbourne coming, they look pretty healthy. They look pretty solid. I cannot wait to see Luke Parker, Caleb Daniel, and some of the new players step in for North Melbourne. Fascinating to see year three under Clarko. I think North Melbourne get the win. I think there's too many missing pieces for the Western Bulldogs, and it's going to hurt them. So I like North Melbourne in this one. Your thoughts?
I'll pick Western Bulldogs on this. I just I, truth be told, I'm not a big North Melbourne fan in general. I don't think they have very good ownership. I don't think they have a lot of key pieces. I think they've drafted okay, but I see nothing within their current roster that I think would make them above a bottom four finish. I think Bulldogs are not, they're not going to be amazing this year. I think they're going to be middle of the road, but I don't, I feel Bulldogs over North Melbourne on this one by about, yeah, let's say 20 to 30 points. That's it.
That'll be an interesting one. I'm really looking forward to that one. An interesting one at the MCG as the Collingwood Magpies host Port Adelaide. Like I said, can Collingwood bounce back again? Dan Houston should be returning from his suspension, so hopefully he gives them a boost. And I'm gonna tip Collingwood only because if Butters is out and Rosie is out, that's a couple of huge losses in the center midfield, which I think then neutralizes Port Adelaide's evenness. I'm just, I'm, I don't know. It's this weird sensation. Port Adelaide going on the road. Nah, you know what? Forget it. I'm gonna tip the pies. Nope, nope. I'm gonna tip Port Adelaide. I'm gonna tip the power on this one. I'm double backing myself sometimes. And go Port Adelaide. I think they find a way to run Collingwood off their feet, just like GWS. I think it's gonna be a long day for the Pies, and unfortunately, just makes the calls of what were we thinking in the offseason even louder. So, your thoughts on this one?
First off, it just every time you say the word tipping, I think about when I was at a Hooters like 5 years ago, and they're like, "Tip your waitresses." Like, okay,
Sorry about that.
you're fine. But in that game, I'm actually gonna go with Collingwood on this one. They're at home. I think they're they've probably gotten the verbal, whatever beat out of them after losing from so much of GWS. I think Port Adelaide going on the road probably gonna be a little bit rusty. And I think it's gonna be a very close game. I think Collingwood, I'm gonna give them the nod. I feel like this is really the game though that could go either way.
Uh-huh.
It's a very close game. I think Port Adelaide's a little bit better team, but I think they're gonna be a little bit rusty. Collingwood's fresh. Their jobs are on the line in a lot of ways early in the season, and it's at home.
Yep. Nope. Totally get it. That's that one. That one could be an interesting one. Like I said, I want to know what the health is for the midfield of Port Adelaide because if they're fully healthy, and they have everybody back, which I know they won't. And I think Butters is out at least, but Rosie could be out too. That's a huge blow in the center midfield, which just then that evens out the game a little bit more than if, say, even if Rosie plays, I think it really tips the scale towards Port Adelaide for me. So fun one over at Adelaide Oval as the Crows take on the St. Kilda Saints in this one. Who do you like in this one?
Adelaide,
I do too.
Adelaide, they're at home. I'm not crazy about St. Kilda either this year. I think they're mediocre. I don't think they're bottom four, but I don't think they're in finals territory yet. And I think Adelaide, I kind of agree with you. I think Adelaide's going to have a little bit better year. Maybe squeak in as like a seventh or eighth seed for the finals this year. And I just think Adelaide overall is just a little bit better constructed roster, especially a little bit earlier in the season. So I'm going to go with Adelaide.
I think they're healthier, and like I said, they may be unleashing a mighty beast into the competition in Riley Thilthorpe. I cannot wait to see that monster step onto the field, which I think will only help their forward line when you add Isaac Rankin and Taylor Walker be able to be more free. I think their defense is always pretty good. We'll have to see. I like the Crowies in this one. This could get ugly if St. Kilda can't make sure that they stay offensively because Adelaide a couple of years ago was a scoring machine at home. Can they get back to that? That will be the biggest question for me on this one. A fun one at the MCG. This could be an absolute cracker. Melbourne hosting GWS. Who do you like in this one?
GWS. I just think they're a better roster. Saw what they did last week against Collingwood. Obviously, they're going to be on the road for this one. Melbourne opening up at home. A lot of old heads, a lot of old Melbourne fans going to be there. I think it's going to be closer than it really should be, but I think GWS will get the win.
GWS win this, but I think Melbourne stays in it. A healthy Clayton Oliver, a healthy Christian Petrarca, and hopefully a healthy Max Gawn could even out some of that huge advantage that the Giants have. Sam Taylor looked absolutely fantastic. It'll be interesting who will be his matchup and how will that happen. And can Melbourne put up a score? Because if GWS can get going, it could get very, very ugly. But I think the midfield battle is going to be fascinating. I like the Giants in this one, but I think the D's are in this to late. And I think GWS just has just a little bit too much overall skill for the D's on this one. And last but not least, rounding up your beloved Gold Coast Suns fly out west to Optus Stadium to be hosted by the West Coast Eagles. I will ask you, sir, head versus heart, Suns, Eagles, who do you like?
Head versus heart as a Gold Coast Suns fan is often opposite sides. On one side, I'm like, yes, please win. On the other side, I'm like, come on, reality. In this case, though, I think it's gonna be fairly close, especially as a road game. I think Gold Coast pulls it off, though. I think they've got too many talented pieces. I think West Coast, there's a lot of unprovens there. They're still a rebuilding team. I really do think that Gold Coast will get the win. I don't think it'll be too far apart in the scores, but I do think Gold Coast would go in there and do what it takes to win.
Suns win this. Suns win this one. They have to win this one. They cannot afford to start the season 0-1, especially with an Eagles team that they're good. They're going to be a little bit better. Harley Reid will be in his second season. It'll be interesting to see how they go. No Tom Barras that you have to deal with, which I think is a little bit of a hole. The Suns should win this one. They should. But then again, though, the Suns are notorious for not winning games that they're supposed to win. So
Especially on the road.
especially on the road. So that is it, Kyle. That is it. That is all 9 games tipped. We went through it again. Like I said, 2 rounds. We had a little bit of a season preview. It's going to be fun. I cannot wait. All 9 games of footy for me this week. Like I said, sleep deprivation will become my friend over the next several months. I cannot wait. As per usual, Kyle, I have to check in. How are things going with you at the unit at both the Cincinnati Dockers and the UC footy team? How are things going? How excited are you? Footy's coming closer over here, even in the States as well.
So things are going well on both fronts. So in terms of UC, we've got about, I'd say 30 or so students that are really engaged. About, I'd say 20 to 24 will come out to our Wednesday practices every week. We also just had our first game against a different opponent for the year. So we had a inter squad scrimmage a couple weeks ago, but our first like game against another team was against Cincinnati Dockers. And first time in UC's club history officially, they got the win, 50 to 41. I was actually playing on the Dockers side because they needed extra numbers. So even when the UC wins, I still find a way to lose. But nevertheless, they won, which is great. They also play the end of this month against the Columbus Cats at home. And then they'll be playing, I believe, the Cleveland Cannons up meeting halfway in Columbus on April the 12th. So it'll be really interesting to see with the club how they handle, playing against steep competition and all that. But it's really going well. A lot of students, I've seen a lot of students come out and try the sport. I've seen very few not come back, which is exactly what we're going for. Now, on the Cincinnati Dockers side, we're working to grow the club. Gotten a few new guys in Cincinnati interested. We've also been working to establish metro teams in Dayton and a little bit in Lexington, trying to help grow greater, within 2 hour drive of greater Cincinnati. So that's been really good. A little bit more luck in Dayton than Lexington at this point, but hey, my DMs and Instagram are always open. If you're in Dayton or Lexington or Cincinnati and you're interested in trying out the sport, just DM me. And I'm also helping the Indy Giants to a little bit to try to get their numbers back up. So both of those are going really well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to round one of the AFL coming back. I'm one of those people up doing schoolwork at 1, 2 a.m. watching my footy, and everyone asks me if I'm okay because they think I'm an insomniac. But that's the life of being a footy fan in America, I suppose.
Yeah, no, 100%. I trust me. I know the insomniac part for sure. Absolutely. So, and again, just a huge thank you again to what you're doing in your part of the country. It's always fantastic. Again, as a footy lover, I love seeing people that are passionate about the game, trying to spread the game out. That's one of the other reasons why I've continued to keep doing the podcast like I do, because yes, I meet a lot of Australians, but sometimes it's just fun to introduce an American to a fellow American who loves the sport from a different part, and does everything I can to support it and cover it the best way I can. So, Kyle, this has been fantastic. Again, it's always great to talk footy with you.
I
Ladies
want
and
to
gentlemen, go
bring
ahead.
something up. Oh, I forgot to mention. That's a question for you. See if you can answer this.
Shoot.
In the USAFL, what is the average age for a male playing in the league?
Oh, I'd have to talk to Brian Barish on that, but my best guess would probably be between 25 and 30. But again, I'm rough guessing on this because just some of the teams that I've played on probably defy that a little bit, because we've had several guys, I think 4 or 5, that have played into their 40s. So
Yep.
sometimes our numbers adjust, but usually I would say roughly between the ages of 25 and 30 is the rough average age of most of the players that are playing in the USAFL.
So the numbers that I got from Nationals this past year, the average male playing the USAFL is 34 years old. It
Okay.
is very difficult to grow a sport in a country when the average person playing it is in their mid 30s. That's
Yep.
why it's so important to grow the sport young, whether it's college, whether it's even younger, because kids, even people in high school, can still play in the USAFL with parents' permission. But the real key, what's going to really decide how much this sport grows in America, is the 18 to 25 demographic.
Yep.
That's what that's what the USAFL really needs to focus on, and all the USAFL clubs need to really focus on recruiting too.
Yep. Nope. Totally get it. Totally get it for sure. So, all right. So that is going to do it for the first AFL round review episode of this particular season. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen, because this is going to be a crazy week for podcasts. I have AFL round review, which you've just listened to. I have my Sandful women's and men's season preview episode coming up very, very soon, along with the WAFL season preview for the women and the men still to come. And then very, very soon, the VFL as well. So my state league season previews are coming up very, very soon. Keep an eye out. And as per usual, we will keep our round reviews going on. I've got some great new co-hosts that are going to join me again this year, along with some very good favorites of mine who I've chatted with for several years. I have still building it up. I'm sitting here looking at my list currently, and the fact that I have, through the 24 rounds of footy, including round zero, I have all of them accounted for except for 5 rounds. So this has been a lot of fun for me. I've got some new podcasts and people hopping on this year that I cannot wait to talk to. And as I said, some favorites, some people that I love chatting footy with hopping on as the season goes on. So keep an eye out for more of my friends and co-hosts for this particular season. That'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals, and we'll be back again with more footy coverage for you very, very soon.